welcome to the Jason Show on my CPE. It's good to have everybody with us around the world. And our guest today is Tom Kirkham. And Tom is with Iron Tech Security. And we're going to talk about it's always been an important topic, but it seems like it's more and more important now. And that is cybersecurity for accountants. And this is a really big topic, Tom, and I know we have a lot of different avenues we could go down here, but let's first establish your credentials on this and then your company's credentials. Your company has been around for over 20 years. You have over 30 years of experience in this field. I guess this is a really broad question to ask first, but tell us a little bit about yourself, either a 30-second elevator pitch, or if you want to talk for 5 minutes about who Tom Kirkham is, that's fine with me, but just introduce yourself to our audience, who you are, a little bit about what you do and where you've been in this field.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I want to bore everyone for 30 minutes, but just really and truly, I actually have more than 40 years because I was a hobbyist when it came to computers. Uh, Back in the 80s, the original IBM XT, and then it evolved into a career in business and things like that. I actually went to college for economics. But I worked as a software, worked at a software company as an executive, but I was also the designer of the software, won several Microsoft awards. And then when I started this company, like you said, about 20 years ago, we were into outsourced IT management. So your audience may know this class of business as an MSP, a managed services provider. And that's a great way to outsource your IT. I would be willing to say the vast majority of the listeners, that is a terrific way to take care of your IT without having an IT staff. The more cost effective, better tools, and on and on and on. But then a few years ago, we launched Iron Tech Security Division, which is a managed security services provider. And of course, we sell all over the United States. I guess technically North America, and that's what we do. We security is always job one, and we deal with a lot of accounting firms and financial advisors, lawyers, and on and on and on, court systems, and a few other things like manufacturers, engineering, things like that. These are typically both from the managed IT side and the cybersecurity side. They just can't go down. They will suffer reputational loss that may be fatal if they have a breach. And especially when it comes to accounting, a lot of you guys, you deal with high net worth individuals, and those are what we're beginning to see now. Is that's kind of the new target for cyber criminals. To go after high net worth individuals. A lot of people don't realize there's over 23 million people in the United States that have a net worth of $1 million or more. And if you read some of the ways that they've been manipulated, I saw a story the other day that a lady was being conned in an email to transfer money, and I think it was $600,000. They actually sent an Uber to her house to take her to the bank because she didn't drive.
Wow.
And she started getting suspicious, and luckily they didn't fleece her. And these stories are happening all of the time. We've brought on new clients that it was a family business, but they had a high net worth, and they suffered several $100,000s in losses because they weren't practicing good cybersecurity hygiene, or they did not have in place any kind of effective defenses against these criminals.
So would it be safe to say, Tom, that the scams that are out there and the risks that are out there now, not just to accountants, but to anybody, it's more than just the old-fashioned like Nigerian prince, like, dearest sirs, you have inherited $40 million, please send me your bank information. It seems like these scams are getting way more sophisticated, and it's really difficult to even pick them out at the start, it seems like.
Yes, absolutely. The days of bad grammar, misspelled words, poor graphics, those are long gone. We're talking about professional criminals that are vertically skilled. So, in the case of a ransomware attack, which is everyone's number one threat, by the way, all of you, I'm sure everyone knows what a ransomware attack is, but basically, the threat vector is typically through an email, and that criminal specialty is psychological manipulation. Social engineering are the fancy terms, but it's really just a con job. And like I said, no misspelled words, no broken English. The graphics, if necessary, are dead on. But actually, the best ones don't even need graphics. They've got a lot of different ways to manipulate people. And then it unleashes an attack, encrypts all the file, and holds them for ransom until you pay it. That's the biggest threat. So you really, over 90% of successful breaches require a non-malicious insider. I mean, think about that. And so one of the services that we provide to clients is continuous cybersecurity awareness training. Not only how to identify a phishing email, identify it as a scam, but also things like how to identify a gas pump skimmer. I've actually been a victim of a couple of times that the gas pump had a skimmer on it that skimmed your credit card info on it. And these videos educate you on how to recognize them. They keep track of how you score so you can get a good baseline of where the company is overall, what their risk is, whether the training is good or people need coaching on it. But that if you do nothing more than implement a continuous cybersecurity awareness training, and it has to be continuous because these threats are evolving as we speak, you'll cut your risk in half. It's the biggest threat vector we have is humans, inadvertently letting them into the network.
So our audience includes like small time operator, like one person offices on up to the huge accounting firms. If you're a small time operator, you're solo practitioner, it would, I know the scammers are going after more the high net worth people nowadays, and they're probably working with bigger CPA firms, but solo operators too have to think about this. I mean, I think a lot of us, we fire up our computer, we have all this stuff in the cloud. Hopefully, most of us are using multi factor authentication on that. But there's so many different ways that you could get gotten on this. And just being a small time operator, I guess, that doesn't necessarily shield you from potentially having problems, but it could even make you more of a victim, couldn't it?
Well, here's the deal that a lot of people don't realize. They just think I'm a single accountant firm. We've got a receptionist and maybe one or two other people, or even just you're by yourself, right? The, the thing is, a vast majority of these ransomware and other attacks are automated. They're using bots. It's a high volume game. That even in a typical ransomware attack, on the criminal side, there's about 4 or 5 or 6 different specialties that they outsource to other criminals. So they obtain an email list. Maybe it's all of the members of all the public accountants in New York State. And they blast out that 100,000 or 200,000 emails or whatever it is. And they're thinking in terms of conversion rates. They don't care how big you are. In fact, they can even automatically calculate the ransom demand on the fly. So if it only detects 1 or 2 computers on the network, maybe that ransom's $3,000 or $5,000. Okay, if it sees 50, it's probably going to be $100,000 or $500,000. It's all done on the fly. It's all done automatically. So if you have 100,000 potential victims on an email list, and only 1% falls victim, that's 1,000 victims. And let's say the average ransomware attack or the actual ransom collected is $10,000. That's a $10 million payday. It's a very, very lucrative business, and chances are they will never know, nor will they care who you are where you are, or anything like that. It is a misnomer that just because you're small or you're in the middle of nowhere, that you can't be a victim. Right? We got a whole bunch of clients that thought that very same thing.
Mhm. So, how do these scams work? I mean, you mentioned that they're bots and ransomware is the big thing. What are some things that accountants need to watch for on, like, wait, this person's trying to get me or this bot's trying to get me? How do you even identify these things, or is it possible to identify them?
Yeah, one of the things that everyone learns when they're doing the training is look at the content of the email carefully. Make sure that the email is from who it purports to be. Like if it says Intuit, don't take that for granted. Take the time to click on that email and reveal the actual email address. And chances are it won't be intuit.com. It'll be Gmail or who knows what, or carefully misspelled Intuit, like Intult. And if you just glance at it, you think it's Intuit. And then when you so one of the ways they do it is they say, okay, we're going to cut off your QuickBooks Online. Attached are some open invoices, and you need to take care of this immediately. When you see that sense of urgency, and it's from a vendor that is critical to the operation of your business, take a moment just to pause before you open the file attachment or do anything that it's asking you to do, and carefully scrutinize that email. And even then, if you're not sure, send it to a skilled cybersecurity team for them to check into it. We get them all the time from clients. We've conditioned them to please don't open anything that if you are the least bit suspicious, go ahead, send it to us. We want that, because the last thing we want is a client to get closer and closer to being an actual victim. Now, we've so far, and I'm not going to be able to say this forever, but none of our clients have been a victim of a successful cyber attack. And we've got a lot of procedures and policies. Another thing that I want to bring up is, don't think you can't afford enterprise grade, Fortune 100, Department of Defense level defenses. There's not a person listening to this that can't afford that level of defense, and you're not going to get it from your IT team. And that's another thing that people fall into the trap. They believe that cybersecurity is part of IT, but it's in reality it's a whole different specialty. And in fact, most of the times when we go into a place that has an IT team, whether it's in place, staff, or they've outsourced it to an MSP or a break fix IT company, whatever, most of the time they're relieved that they're not having to worry about security, because good IT people know that they're not security experts. But, if you can put this DoD level defenses in place for as little as $40-50 a month per endpoint, basically, or per person. And it varies depending on what your risk profile is. We've pretty much every single client we have some differences in their risk profile. We have we have law firms that there may only be 5 attorneys, but they do $20 million a year. And then we've got law firms that have 100 attorneys and they do $20 million a year. The size and the revenue you generate is one of the factors. The type of clients you have is one of the factors. You just need to, you mentioned multi-factor authentication. One of the technical controls, one of the technical defensive controls that you need to put in place is what's known in the business as EDR or MDR, Managed Endpoint Detect and Respond. Replace your antivirus with it. Antivirus is just not effective anymore. A ransomware attack just blows right by it because there's no virus to detect in a modern ransomware attack. And only EDRs is going to, if you fall for the email, it gets through your spam filter. and you open up that Excel spreadsheet, the macro calls the disk encryption service. Only that class of product can stop it. So you want to have best of breed layered defense. Those of you that's been in the military, that's referred to as defense in depth. Okay? You want to wrap layers and layers of defense. Security awareness training by itself is not good enough. Still need an EDR, still need to use multi-factor authentication wherever possible. You need to think twice about using a public email service like Gmail, Yahoo, AOL. Yahoo and AOL has been compromised so many times it's not funny. Gmail, although it's more secure, you're getting into privacy issues especially if you're using the free version of Gmail. What are they going to do with that data? It's going to be sold, right? You're the product if you're using free services. But that's what we do. We're a best of breed technical and administrative control company, and we practice defense in depth. And we put the best defense in place that we think is adequate for the risk. We want to get you to that 99.99% chance that you're not going to have a successful attack. If you have none of these things in place, you've got, I don't know what it is, but you've got a high degree of chance that you're going to get hit with at least a ransomware attack. And if anyone's listening and you've had a ransomware attack and your network was not forensically examined, you've got other things on your network. No modern ransomware attack doesn't carry multiple payloads. In other words, every ransomware attack installs server backdoors, workstation keyloggers, and then that ransomware criminal, when he collects his $10 million, right? And before he goes off to vacation on the Mediterranean or Fiji or wherever he's going to go, he goes on the dark web, which is where they all hang out. It's the non-visible internet. And he posts a list. Here's all the servers that I installed this backdoor on. Here's all the workstations that I installed this keylogger, and sells that information to other specialists to exploit, because he's not a specialist in exploiting server backdoors or keyloggers. That's not his deal. So it's just another revenue stream for the ransomware criminal.
So you touched on this during your answer to the last question, but antivirus, I mean, we all, I think, have antivirus. Hopefully we do on our computers. Explain again why just the regular old antivirus that you have on your computer isn't enough nowadays to stop this stuff.
About 6 years ago, give or take, the NSA, National Administration, United States NSA, are arguably the nation's, if not the world's, premier cyber warfare organization, was breached. And their tools were stolen along with the source code. So it changed the game tremendously. And other nation states have been breached, and their cyber offensive weapons are out there on the dark web for free to download and use against us, and they're being used against us every day. But going back to a modern ransomware attack, the storyline, that's an actual technical term, the storyline goes, you get an email, it's going to manipulate you, create a sense of urgency or whatever, to open up a file attachment, and let's say it's an Excel spreadsheet. The spreadsheet calls a macro, and the macro calls the Windows disk encryption service. Nowhere in that storyline is there a virus to detect. Only by looking at what's happening in real time and using artificial intelligence or a neural net and predictive outcomes of this flow, the storyline, can it be detected. Antivirus can't see it. It blows right past it. Antivirus relies on a signature file. You have to download new signature files constantly. I don't even know how many times a day you have to do it now. But because we don't allow our clients to use antivirus, it's just not good. We haven't for years. But there's a different class of product that's monitored, that Anomalies are investigated. They're monitored by a security operations center or a command center to look for these either attacks or these suspicious items. And because it uses artificial intelligence, it sees a storyline. So when it sees an Excel spreadsheet being open, the spreadsheet's calling a macro, that neural net knows that the likely result of these processes and these orders, in this order, is going to result in a ransomware attack. So it immediately freezes the processes, notifies the command center, and an investigation begins. So antivirus it's just no good anymore. In fact, Norton antivirus actually includes a crypto miner with it, which is mind-boggling. Peter Norton cannot possibly be proud. Back in the 90s, Peter Norton was a god to, us nerds. And I read a lot of his books. I met him one time. And, of course, he sold the company off a long, 20 years ago probably. But just to include a crypto miner in it, or to, credit monitoring and all of this kind of stuff, that's ridiculous. It's that when you get an internet security suite, nothing in that suite is best of breed. It's an all-in-one solution, and you just can't expect a good defense with an all-in-one solution like that. We implement EDRs and a bunch of other acronyms that I could just name off, but these are all, almost all of them are from vendors that's their only job, is to make the best EDR in the world, or the best SIM tool in the world, or the best cybersecurity awareness training in the world. That's their job for the vast majority of the vendors that we work with, our vendor partners.
I know you have some thoughts on cybersecurity insurance as well. I know my E&O provider actually added some kind of add-on just new this year. You get $25,000 of cybersecurity coverage, and I honestly don't even know what that really means. I suppose I should have, but I didn't read deeply into what that means. They add it now. I mean, what are your thoughts on cybersecurity insurance, and is that enough? I'm guessing your answer to that is going to be no, but why is that not enough, I guess, to just have that as an add-on to your E&O or some other separate insurance?
Yeah, well, and you should have it. But cybersecurity insurance, like all other forms of insurance, is the last thing you want to rely on to make you or your firm whole again. If I discover faulty wiring, I live in an old house. What is it, 50, 60 years old, 60 years old. So, some of the wiring's a little off here and there, hadn't repaired the whole thing. Well, when I discover sparks coming out of an older outlet, these older non-grounded outlets, I'm calling my guy, my master electrician, saying, okay, all of the outlets in this room haven't been replaced. Let's get them done. Because even though I have homeowners insurance, that's not going to make me whole. Life insurance, car insurance, cybersecurity insurance, they are not going to buy your reputation back. And I can vouch a personal experience. I was using a small accounting firm for a few things, and they got acquired by another accounting firm that I knew had a ransomware attack because they didn't take our recommendations when they were a client of ours. As soon as they acquired the one I was using, I dropped it. I'm not going to go to them. That's a threat vector to me. And that's the kind of thing that'll happen to your reputation. Almost all, at least all the states in the country that I'm aware of, they require reporting of these things. And there's more and more regulatory compliance that's happening every day. Like automobile dealers, they're subject to FTC compliance, and they don't even know it yet. This is something relatively new, that they've got to up their cybersecurity game. And it goes on and on. But yeah, you need cybersecurity insurance, and you just hope you never need it. Our job is to make sure you never have to use it. We're seeing, a lot of these applications, they're going to ask questions that if you don't have a professional, IT or preferably a security professional, you may answer the question wrong on the application, and then you have an event, claims are going to be denied. I'm seeing 20 and 30% of claims being denied.
Wow.
Sometimes they don't pay off fast enough. A ransomware attack is going to require you to pay the ransom within 5 days. You know, is your insurance company going to respond that fast? Probably not. Yeah. So,
So
yeah,
so ransomware, when you're a firm and you get hit with ransomware, I mean, what how does that work? It like locks your computer and you have to pay the ransom within a certain period of time to get your system back, I guess is how that works, right?
exactly. Exactly. So imagine, a typical small business accounting firm in North America. You deal with a lot of QuickBooks files, and it's probably on a shared folder on a server some in the office there, and everybody's using all that. Any one of those people that gets hit with one of those phishing emails can potentially have all the files encrypted. You won't be able to open up your QuickBooks files. You won't be able to open up any other spreadsheets, anything like that. And you will not know that attack is underway until it demands the ransom. It goes about it very stealthily, and it doesn't consume a lot of system resources. So you won't notice a big slowdown on the network. You may accidentally discover one file that's encrypted and one that's not while it's going about its business. But the likelihood is that once it fires off, depending on the volumes of the files on the network, it may be 10 minutes, it may be 10 hours, maybe 10 days before it encrypts everything on the network. Then and only then does it reveal itself. Here's where you send the Bitcoin to. Here's some other payment alternatives. These guys are so vertically specialized, they provide an 800 number help desk to assist the victim in how do I get Bitcoin. A lot of victims don't know the first thing about Bitcoin and how they get it. Or how do I get these non-traceable cash cards they're talking about. They provide assistance with unencrypting the files in case something goes wrong. Because
So is this
their business model doesn't work if they don't unencrypt the files.
right? Now,
You
is
know
this
that
something if this pops up and your computer's like, can you just take it to your IT guy or take it to you or some computer specialist and they could just go in and delete the file or something? Or is there any way around it? Or are you basically out of luck if this ransomware pops up?
well, you've got to make a call. Choose to either pay the ransom or restore from a backup. Now, if you're not monitoring your backups and checking them each and every day that they're working and periodically testing them, you may discover that the backup's been broken for 2 months and you didn't know. I have never seen a backup system that works flawlessly. Believe me, we search for them constantly. Been searching for them for well over 20 years, and there's never been one. Sometimes they fail to notify. Sometimes they're corrupt. All sorts of things can go wrong with backup systems. That's why you have to monitor them. If you've got good backups, you can potentially restore from backup. They may take a few hours or days. You're going to have a loss of productivity. But you really need to engage what's known in the business as an incident response. We can only do incident response with our existing clients because we already know the tools and everything we've got on there. We already know what the storyline is. Probably got a really good idea of the vector, who the threat actor is, and on and on and on. We can detect other things on the network. But there are incident response cybersecurity companies that are there to negotiate. If they're asking for 100,000 or $500,000, or like Colonial Pipeline was $4.5 million. That's when you need to engage one of those, because if they're not a client of ours and they're in the middle of an attack, but first of all, we're not familiar with the network, if their backups are good, and then we've got to treat them as a hostile environment that could potentially infect us. So that's why there's specialists that do nothing but incident response. Our job is to make sure that doesn't happen.
So
That's
you had
that's why you've got to
mentioned
put the defense in place.
yeah. So now you had talked about, I guess I don't expect you to say much on this. I'm bringing this up just as an FYI to accountants here. The FTC requires accountants to have written data security plans in place also. And that's new within the last few years. It's actually an FTC requirement, not an IRS requirement, although I think the IRS is the enforcer of it. The FTC requires it. And, if you go through the FTC handbook on how to create it, I don't know that it necessarily is that helpful to you, especially if you're a smaller practitioner. You're the one doing a lot of the stuff. I guess let's talk about that. Small practitioners, any practitioner, large firms, you know, they probably have an IT provider. The larger firms do anyway, but I know you had talked about this before. Let's cover it again, though. IT provider versus what you do. Why would it be good for a firm to potentially have both?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Okay, think about what the objectives are between between information technology, IT, versus information security, InfoSec. That's what it's known inside the business, InfoSec. The different objectives. IT, since the invention of computers, but especially PCs, when we're talking small accounting firms, your investment in that technology hits the bottom line each and every day. In other words, if you invest in IT, you get more productivity, more efficiency. Your business is more profitable. You can get more done, serve more clients, handle more data. That's IT is focused on never going down. Make sure that the computers are running as good as they can, minimizing help desk calls. It's a managerial decision in that investment on the firm's behalf. Now, if you look at a security investment, that's more of a leadership strategy, worst case scenario. It's more of a strategic decision because it's about the long-term viability of the firm, the long-term viability of your reputation, the long-term protection of your clients themselves. So you hope that that is a negative investment, right? Because it hits the P&L every day negatively. It's an expense. But that expense, because it's really not expensive, that expense outweighs the reputational damage to the firm, fatal, the death of the firm, and all of that because of a security. It's like insurance. You hope you never have to use it, but you're going to write that check for it every year, every month, whatever. To have E&O, to have building insurance, general liability, and car insurance, all on and on and on. Because you're making a leadership or a strategic decision. And those are fundamentally the different things. And security is job one to a security firm. IT, it's productivity, efficiency, minimize end user frustrations. Hopefully, if you're doing it wisely, you're going to replace computers and servers before they break. You don't try to milk them for everything you can get out of them. We replace. It's not unusual. I don't think we have a laptop in the company that's much over 2 years old. And servers, if your server's 6, 7 years old, it's going to break, and that's going to shut you down for a while. May even have a loss of data. So if you're practicing good IT management and making the right decisions, you're going to replace that equipment before it breaks, because in the grand scheme of things, $1,000 PC, $5,000 server is really not that much money to keep from having a loss of productivity. Whatever your billable hours are, if your server's down for a day, do the math. All of a sudden, that $5,000 isn't that big of a deal, especially if you lose the data and you hadn't checked your backups for 3 months.
So you've hit on a lot of this throughout what you've said so far today, but just how bad are things right now in terms of cybersecurity and hacking and ransomware? I mean, you talked about how NSA even got hacked a few years ago. I mean, how bad are things right now?
Well, unfortunately, it's ever increasing now that these nation state level offensive cyber weapons are being used against us. It's a huge industry. It's a multi-trillion-dollar international industry. It is bigger than the worldwide illegal drug trade, far bigger. And it's increasing. They are getting more and more skilled every day. Tens of thousands of criminal hackers, nation state hackers, terrorist organizations. Their skills are improving. We have to monitor things. I mean, the vast majority of people, when I bring this up, we have to worry about Ukraine. From a cyber security standpoint, because Russia harbors a lot of these cyber criminals. Okay? And if Russia wanted to retaliate against NATO countries for all of the sanctions that they've put them under, all Putin has to do is wink, wink, nod, nod to all of the criminals, attack at will. And we know that he can do that because he did it to Ukraine 5 or 6 years ago. They did out an all-out cyber war against Ukraine for weeks and months, long before this invasion occurred. Ukrainians, we didn't know it here. We didn't notice it here because we were worried about the tweet of the day, right? But in Ukraine, they didn't know if their planes were going to fly. They didn't know if they were going to be able to buy milk in the grocery store. They didn't know if the trains were going to run. They didn't even know if Chernobyl was leaking radiation. The water was going to work. The electricity was going to work. Russia attacked them all the way into the wintertime. And the winters are cold in Ukraine. And they stopped just short of outright killing people. And this is years ago. This is like 5 or 6 years ago. And that's all it would take. Now, for whatever reason, he hasn't played that card yet. But we're woefully unprotected if that were to happen. The United States especially, we don't have all of these cyber mercenaries like Russia has. The United States has traded security for productivity and efficiency for decades. And it's just hardly anyone has adequate security. And hoping it won't happen to you is not a strategy. That's not what a good leader will do. That's like I said, we've got plenty of clients that hoped it wouldn't happen. We have clients that hoped it won't happen again and again. And finally, after the third attack, I think I'll just spend $1,000 a month and get my firm protected.
Right.
Or not a month, but $1,000 a year to get my firm protected.
Because once it happens to you, you're like, you talked about this, you're marked in some ways. So it's not like the cyber terrorists are going to say, okay, well, we've hit them, so we'll leave them alone now. It marks you. It's like, well, let's come back and try again. And other people will now know, hey, we can get them. So just because it's happened once doesn't mean it won't happen again.
Yeah, you're a patsy, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Especially you pay the ransom, and yeah, it's going to happen again. That's all there is to it. And don't forget, there's multiple payloads. Sometimes those server backdoors will sit there for months or years before somebody else picks it up and starts exploiting it. And then if you deal with anybody that does intellectual property, and that's very interesting to the Chinese. They've stolen a lot of intellectual property over the past decades. Some people say it's the biggest transfer of wealth in human history. We come across that with some patent lawyers and things like that. But, you really have to think about what data do you have that may make your firm a victim of a targeted attack. We are under targeted attacks. Tech is every day because they know that we're a security provider and it's a vector to our clients. But most of our clients aren't. Your Colonial Pipelines, your JBS, the ones that hit CNN that everybody hears about that gives them a false sense of security, that's not, the most of the attacks are 3,000, 5,000. Normally, when I'm doing a regular webinar, I'll ask everybody on the webinar, have you or someone you personally know been a victim of a ransomware attack? And it varies anywhere between 10 to 30% of the people answer affirmatively.
Wow.
They at least know someone that's been a victim, or they themselves were.
I think this leads into a discussion of your book, Tom, The Cyber Pandemic Survival Guide, Protecting Yourself from the Coming Worldwide Cyber War. It looks like this just came out about a month ago on Amazon. Tell us a little about this book and what prompted you to write it.
Well, that's a great question, and thanks for the plug. First of all, my when I began the project, I did not want to write a boring, dry, technical cybersecurity. You know, some of the things that I've said here today is kind of boring to the average person. You know, oh, it's another three-letter acronym and all this kind of stuff. So what I did is I created a fictional story around a little town in Connecticut that was a victim of a big attack. Shut the town down, and people got hurt, and on and on. And I introduced characters that make it a lot more interesting, while at the same time understanding my audience is the typical small business owner that I've dealt with for over 30 years. That's really my experience, is dealing with owners and presidents and sometimes large companies like Ford or whatever. But the vast majority has been small business owners. And so it's written in such a manner that not only is it entertaining, and these characters that we've built is going to be in the next series, in the next couple of books that's coming out, and I don't know when it's going to end. But we've built this whole storyline to make it a lot more interesting, and it really is a light read. Just read the reviews and judge for yourself. But it's a real easy read, hour and a half. But you're going to know a lot more about what goes into what's wrong from a leadership management perspective. Why do most people not think properly about this? And it's just lack of education, you know. And that's what I do. That's why I'm on your show. So
Well, good. How long did it take you to write this book? Just out
a
of
lot longer than it
curiosity.
should have. Uh, I think I have around 15 months in it. There were some other things that happened during that period that kind of put it off about 2 or 3 months. But I've got another one coming out November 1 ish, and it's more geared around. It's going to have the same story, the same characters in it, but it's going to be geared more around personal privacy and high net worth individuals. And so this one I'm getting out a lot quicker. I kind of learned from the first one. We got to streamline this process, and we've already got a story. We've got characters already fleshed out and built and everything else like that.
So this is a work of fiction with nonfiction elements built into it, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
Right. If you've ever read the E Myth, the what is it,
Mhm.
20-year-old book,
Yeah.
the author, and it escapes me right now, but the author takes a fictional story to make all of his points about the entrepreneurs are not what most people think they are. You know, most people think they have a vision and an overarching strategy to create something really wonderful, but in reality, most entrepreneurs are just tired of working for their man, and they're technically skilled, but they don't have all of these other skills and everything that they need to successfully be an entrepreneur. So that book walks you through it. If you haven't read it, it is an awesome, awesome book. It holds up well to this day, even though it's 20, 30 years old. There's been some revised editions of it. And so that was kind of the model. I wanted it to be entertaining. I don't want to bore everyone to death, but it makes a point about what you really need to put in place.
All right, Tom. I think we've covered everything that was on our list of things that we wanted to cover. So is there anything else on your side that you think is like really important that we need to mention that we haven't, or is there anything that you want to like repeat because it's so important for our audience to take away from all the things that we've talked about today?
Well, I think that perhaps the only thing that I haven't emphasized is the need to engage with an infosec specialist. That it's not do it yourself anymore. Once again, it's not an IT specialty. It's been our experience, as well as others in the InfoSec business, that about 90% of IT professionals really don't understand the NIST cybersecurity framework. They don't know what it's like to be ISO compliance. They don't know these Department of Defense defensive tools that anybody can put on, and they just don't have the experience and understanding and dealing with these best of breed tools and procedures and practices. And it's like, if you were an attorney, which I know no one is probably, or very few, but it's like you just don't represent yourself in court. You go to the experts, and this is when I need an electrician, I go to the best one I know of. Need a plumber, I got a great plumber. Just go down the list. And this is another one of those things that don't treat it trivially, and make sure that you get the best advice, that they can explain to you why you need implement these services and policies and procedures and technical controls, and exactly what it's going to protect you from, and have the
So
confidence that they're successful at that.
let's give a plug for your company too. I know we really haven't talked much about Iron Tech Security. That's a good point to lead into, working with the experts on this. We have talked a little about your company, but tell us a little more about your company and how people could maybe get some more information if this interview has kind of scared them into taking action today.
Yeah, so IronTechSecurity.com, just like it sounds. Just go there, and you'll find a link that you can schedule a 10 or 15-minute discussion. For those of you that are a small accounting firm, we typically we have 5 things that we put in place. We know that you're going to need it because no one has it. And sometimes we just say, well, we don't have to do a real big risk assessment, or we can do it later. Not saying you don't need one, but if you don't have the 5 things, you need them right away. Usually that's a 5, 10, 15-minute phone call. You'll get an idea of the expenses, what it's going to protect you from, and that's the best way to start. And a managed security service provider is not in every town, okay? IT people, they're in every town of practically any size, but security specialists aren't. And so it's not, everything's monitored remotely anyway. And our firm is relatively small, and we're backed up by our partner vendors by literally hundreds of InfoSec specialists all over the world. So when we have an attack breakout, we're engaging with dozens of InfoSec specialists, that are investigating and responding and planning and, all of those different things. And that's what you're going to get when you engage with a specialist.
So if I sign up with you with my firm, what's the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month type of ongoing relationship that a firm would have with Iron Tech Security? I mean, is it like weekly contact? Is it like, oh, I got a weird email, so I forward it on to you? How does that what I guess how much in the background are you about? How does that relationship work, I guess?
That's a great question. Well, if we're doing our job right, and I'd like to think we are, on your side, if you were a client, it's going to be those suspicious emails or something else that you just think is weird, right? On our side, we're going to be monitoring and looking at alerts that you probably don't even know about, stopping threats, and you're going to receive reports, or these are the threats that we stopped and mitigated, responded to. These are what we think the threats were, and all of that. And then we're going to make recommendations, because the threat environment's constantly evolving. So you've got to have that relationship with a skilled InfoSec team to understand that. So when one of the things that IT is sloppy about doing, and sometimes I offend IT people, but if you're not sloppy about this, you're 1 in a million, okay? But they have a reluctance to put on new patches, Microsoft Office patches, because it breaks stuff. Microsoft writes buggy software or buggy patches. Well, we have to do a security assessment, a risk assessment on each and every software patch. And sometimes those patches cannot wait. They've got to be put on immediately, or at least the close of business. IT doesn't want to do that because, once again, they don't want to impact productivity and efficiency. They just wait and let everybody else be guinea pigs. But every once in a while, you can't wait on those patches. And that's something else you get by having a cybersecurity team always looking at and monitoring the software updates and the new threat actors, the new tactics and techniques. Another nation state breach. What are these weapons looking like? And what is ours? Probably once a month we discover something new. Okay, is our tools effective against that? We have to do it. If it's not, guess what? We're contacting all of our clients and saying, okay, we got to change some things. This is a real new threat. We think that you have a higher risk of being attacked, so we need to implement this feature that maybe in the past wasn't that important. That's kind of
All
what it
right.
looks like. But if we're doing our job, you're going to send out, oh, wow, that's unusual. I didn't believe we had that many attacks. And check these emails out. That's what it's going to look like on your side.
And the cost is not nearly as much as, I mean, I know you probably quote each one separately, but yet the cost isn't as much as people might think it would be.
Yeah, yeah, $30, $40 a month per endpoint. Now that depends. That's the low end.
Yeah.
It just depends on what your risk is. Gross revenue. There's industry standards for what companies should spend on cybersecurity defense. This is really no mystery. We know that the best run companies, and it varies by vertical and everything else like that, but accountants especially need to be very sensitive to this. But they know the best practices in their industry, and you can go to your CPA association or society or whatever, and hopefully they can give you what, you should spend 0.1% of your annual revenue on cybersecurity or whatever the number is. That's best practices. Well, that's best practices because they know what's effective. Other accounting firms knows what's effective, and they're very, very happy that they spend it because they don't have to worry about an attack. And so, like I said, there's no mystery, and I'm not talking about this just because I sell it. Sometimes I speak in person a lot, and it's not unusual for me. I go to an accounting convention. I'm going to one in Atlanta in the next couple of weeks. It wouldn't surprise me if they have an FBI guy there. Well, everyone flocks to the FBI guy, but they're law enforcement. The horse has already left the barn, okay? You're not going to hear what you need to put in place to make sure the barn doesn't burn down. And that's where my expertise is to make sure that doesn't happen to you. So find yourself a managed security services provider.
I just thought of something else. We were worried at the start that would this take an hour, and it has. So we're down to our last couple of minutes here already, Todd. But I thought of one more question that just popped up into my head, and I think this is specific to us small-time operators. Now, I am in the cloud, but I know a lot of smaller practitioners, especially the older ones, like, I'm not in the cloud. They just have everything on their hard drive on a computer. But they're probably checking email on that same computer. So just because you're not in the cloud, I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that you're just okay operating on your laptop, not accessing software in the cloud. You're accessing things on your hard drive. If you're checking email or you get texts to your machine or whatever, you could be clicking on links or attachments that could still harm that machine.
Well, that's a lot bigger question than the 3 minutes that we have
I
left.
know, I know.
But no, it's a great question, and this is important. This is important. We took on a new client about a year ago. It's about 150 accountants in this firm, maybe more, maybe 200. They were told by their IT provider that they had virtualized everything to the cloud, desktops and all. And they were told by their IT provider that you're in the cloud, you don't have to worry about all these 5 things and all this advanced security. Yes, you do. There's different risk, but the cloud gives you no more immunity from a cyber attack than being on premises. They are just different risk. Keyloggers can devastate all of your cloud stuff. Depending on how your cloud is structured, you could be hit with a ransomware attack. I got a friend of mine has an insurance company. All of his stuff was virtualized, and he got hit with a ransomware attack, and as well as about 40 or 50 other insurance companies across the country that were using that same cloud provider, and they were told the same thing. We don't have to worry about this because you're in the cloud. So the short answer is don't. That's an IT person talking. The cloud is somehow more secure. It's absolutely not. If it wasn't, or if it was more secure, emails would not get compromised. Facebook wouldn't get compromised. You know, it's just different. There's different threat vectors.
Well, Tom, looks like we have to wrap things up, but I have a feeling we could talk all day about this. Maybe we should have you back on around November 1st, you said, is when your next book is coming out.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's plan on that. That is Tom Kirkham, Iron Tech Security. Tom, thanks so much for joining us, and I think we'll be talking to you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Jason. It's been my pleasure.
All right.